Hey everyone, welcome back to day 23 of the Reprogram Yourself Challenge. I'm so excited that you're here. Today we are going to continue to talk about how to change your beliefs. Because remember, the whole intention of this program is so that way you can start manifesting on autopilot what you desire to experience. And how are we manifesting? We're manifesting from our beliefs. And by now you should realize that one, just because you have a belief in your mind, it doesn't mean that it's true. And two, just because you believe a belief doesn't mean that it's useful. And the whole idea behind the majority of belief changes in NLP is to make sure that the beliefs that you're holding on to are actually useful. And when you notice that they aren't useful, to really rewire your mind to have a useful belief. Now, our beliefs really show us how we perceive the world, and everybody perceives it a little differently. We end up creating mental maps in our unconscious mind that are really based on sensory information that ends up getting stored. And we talked about yesterday how you can really manipulate that sensory information so that way you can actually start installing beliefs that are useful and align with the reality that you desire to experience. Now, when they put NLP together, they really took a bunch of people who were experts in their field at really helping people transform. And they realized that a lot of these individuals carried the same beliefs, had the same assumptions about people, about reality, and these were very useful beliefs. So what happened was they basically accumulated all of these beliefs and put them together in something called presuppositions. So the idea is here, not everyone has the same mental map, because remember, when information goes into our unconscious mind, it gets distorted. So when we mess with and manipulate the brightness of a picture, and we make it darker, or we manipulate the sounds that we're hearing, or we manipulate the feelings that are stored in our unconscious mind, we actually start associating these beliefs with different beliefs. So since we don't all have the same mental maps, we can really study and learn from people who have really empowering mental maps. And that was the whole notion behind presuppositions. If these people have really great mental maps in the sense that they are empowering, they see people in the best light, they expect the best out of the world, they're actually able to stay empowered, help other people become empowered, and really shift the way that people perceive reality. And when you perceive reality differently, you're actually in control to change things. So today we're going to talk about some presuppositions that are useful to believe. If you do not already believe these things, these are things that you're going to want to install into your brain because again, they are useful, and things that are useful are more empowering. And when we have more useful mental maps, we actually are able to show up more empowered throughout our lives. Now, just because you are able to control some things in your reality, it does not mean that you have absolute control. And this is where law of assumption teachings get a little toxic, because they're telling you that you can absolutely control and manipulate everything and everyone outside of you. And one of the presuppositions in NLP is that you don't have absolute control. You do have control to be able to change things, but you don't need and you will not have absolute control in your reality. But you can control, and you do have 100% ability to control how you react, how you respond, and how you perceive things. This is why you'll often hear me say, it doesn't matter what's happening outside of you. It matters how you react and respond and what you do with what's happening outside of you. Because at the end of the day, you have full control over you. And if you're telling yourself that you don't, it's because you're giving your power away to other people or things outside of you. But at the end of the day, that's just a scapegoat for you not doing the personal development work to be able to master yourself, to be able to have emotional intelligence, to be able to go through things that aren't quote unquote going exactly how you want them to, and still be able to show up in the way that you desire to show up, no matter what's going on. So while you cannot control other people and things outside of you, you can absolutely control you. This is also why I always tell you that every experience is a lesson. Everyone is a teacher. And when you can see everything outside of you as something that is giving you the ability to learn, to grow, and for you to be able to change your perceptions. If you're always learning a lesson, extracting the wisdom is what you're always going to hear me say, then you're always growing. And when you see everything like that, then you actually change your perception on things not going right because you ultimately believe that everything is happening for you. And if something is happening that you don't desire outside of you, it's because there is a lesson there for you to learn. And when you just show up every day like you are a student of life, and you can always be extracting wisdom, you can always be growing, you can always be associating a positive expectation with what's happening, even when it looks like things are crumbling outside of you. Now, another presupposition is that feedback is something that we absolutely encourage. So this means if everything outside of you is wisdom, if everything outside of you is information, if everything outside of you exists to help you become your best and most empowered self, then feedback is actually good. And where a lot of people that stay stagnant in their life, where they go wrong, is they see failure as a bad thing. Whereas successful people see failure as an inevitable part of becoming successful. The people that are the most successful in life have actually failed more. Where a lot of people will be afraid to fail, so they won't take action and they won't do things differently because they're worried that it won't work out. People that are successful know that they fail their way into success. They're going to fail a lot more times, but it's about when you do quote unquote fail, you are extracting the wisdom and then you're pivoting and you're doing it differently. So it's not about getting lost or getting down or having these negative feelings or expectations or stopping what you're doing. It's about looking at and evaluating what worked, what didn't work, what can I do differently, what do I need to shift, where do I need to pivot. It's always in your control to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to just evaluate the evidence outside of me, not take it personally. But if this didn't work out, what about it didn't work out? What about it did work out? How can I do this differently next time so that way it's actually more fruitful, it's actually more successful, it actually goes the way that I desire it to go? And this is what the people that are really successful, especially in business, do, because they're always willing to do something. They make decisions quickly and then they execute it and then they look at what happened, always taking feedback as evidence of what they need to clean up and do differently. Another thing that you'll often hear me say is it doesn't matter how many times you fail, it matters how quickly you get back up. Because a lot of people will wallow in self-pity and they'll keep themselves from taking action because something didn't go the way they desire it to, and then they kind of throw in the towel. But how does that help anyone? It really doesn't, right? If you want to be successful, if you want something to work out and it doesn't work out, the only way that it is going to work out is if you keep going, right? You'll often hear people say the only way you're going to fail at something is if you stop completely. Because if you're always just picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and then looking at the evidence, looking at the information outside of you, and then creating a game plan to do it differently, to execute it in a different way, that's when you're going to be light years ahead of most people, because most people won't even try because they're afraid to fail. And then other people will fail and then they'll stop. Another presupposition is that you are fully resourced. At the end of the day, you have everything inside of you that you need to be able to navigate anything that's coming up, anything that's happening outside of you. And when you see yourself as well resourced, you're actually able to always navigate the unwanted situations, because if it's something that you don't want to experience, there's a lesson that you're learning. There's something that you need to be shifting and doing differently. There's always something inside of you that you can shift. And a lot of people will see things as there's only one way to do it. And if that doesn't work out, it's not going to work. But if you know that you're fully resourced, then you have the ability inside of you without needing to lean on anyone else. You have the ability inside of you to do it differently, to show up differently, to come up with a solution, to see it differently, to change your perception. And this is another area that if you get into RRT with Dr. John Connolly, you're going to hear him talking about being resourced. Because when you tell yourself and when you ultimately believe that you are fully resourced, you're always commanding your subconscious mind to look for solutions for you, to look for ways to navigate through this, to move through this. You have a solution-oriented mindset instead of a fixed mindset that says it can only happen this way, I've got limited resources, whatever it is. And especially when we talk about money, there's so many people that believe that they aren't resourced. And what is one of the prime drivers of your subconscious mind? To make you right. So if you believe that you're not fully resourced and you're limited in resources, you will be. And resources in this case being money. If you believe that you're always fully resourced and there's infinite ways that money can come into you because you are a resourceful person and you're going to find ways, then you're going to have the resources and it's going to be unlimited to you. Another presupposition is that your worth is inherent. You do not need to do anything or gain anything to be worthy. You are inherently worthy because you were born on this planet, and that doesn't change. Your behaviors aren't technically bad or good because there's a behavior that you do that is actually beneficial if you were in a different situation, right? So it's not like this is a one size fits all. There are behaviors that are going to be helpful in some situations, and there are behaviors that are not going to be useful in other situations. So it's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's just that some behaviors are not going to be the most useful behavior in a certain situation. But it doesn't mean that your behavior makes you inherently unworthy. You are worthy. It's about gathering information and saying what behavior here in this situation would be useful. And also being aware of which behaviors wouldn't be useful in a certain situation. And of course, trying to avoid those unwanted behaviors. If you notice that it comes up, it doesn't mean anything negative about you. It just means that you weren't aware of what was the most useful behavior. And you can always shift your behavior. You can always shift, and you can always see yourself as worthy. You can always see yourself as resourced. So if something is unwanted, then it's just about gathering information and showing up differently and doing it differently next time. When you stop making things personal and when you start just looking at everything outside of you as information and feedback and something that you can actually use to support you, your life will change. Another presupposition, which we've already talked about, is how we really view and perceive the world through our senses. So if we are actually zooming in and getting more clear on the picture in our mind, getting more clarity on the sounds that we're hearing, getting more clarity on the feelings that we feel in relation to the things that we are witnessing, the less we're actually going to filter the information, the less our mind's actually going to distort the information, and the more accurate our mental maps will be because we're always picking up information, whether we consciously are aware of it or not, or unconsciously aware of it, we're always picking up information. So it's about you paying attention to these images, you paying attention to these feelings, you paying attention to these sounds, and actually having a crystal clear image or feeling or sound. And it's about connecting with these. The more we connect with how we are perceiving the world, the more we connect with our feelings, the more we connect with what we're seeing, the more we connect with what we're hearing, we're actually able to store information better in our minds more accurately, and we're actually able to communicate better with other people. And when we're able to communicate better, that means that we're probably going to have more fruitful conversations. That means that our interactions with other people are going to be more successful. This is why a lot of people in sales use NLP, because it helps them to build rapport with the people that they're talking to. It helps them to understand how people really view the world. So if somebody is more visual, then you're going to communicate in more visual language. If someone is more auditory, you're going to communicate in more auditory languages. If somebody is more kinesthetic, then we're going to use more kinesthetic language so that way we can actually connect with that person more. And at the end of the day, when communication doesn't go as planned, it just means that we can communicate it differently. And there's always a different way that you can communicate with yourself and with other people. Now, another part of this is because we are sensory beings, that means that we really experience things through our senses. So if we change the sensory input that's in our mind, like we did yesterday, that's actually showing us how we can experience reality differently because we are changing what's stored in our mind as a belief. And because our beliefs are creating our reality, we can always ultimately change the beliefs that we have in our mind, which means that we can create a different experience experience with reality. Another presupposition is that when you have real choices, you can actually make the best choice. So it's not about constantly finding problems, where that's what a lot of people are doing. They're finding problems and then they're putting a time frame on it, and then they're feeling pressure, and then they're making a choice, they're making a decision from this pressure, from this frantic state, and then they're not making the best choice, and then that actually compounds frantic state. It compounds the fact that there's more problems happening. And so this is about really being able to zoom out and not be so reactive when things are happening, and stop being problem oriented. You'll hear me say often to get out of problem frequency, because if you're in problem frequency, what are you going to attract more of? Problems, right? And if you're constantly telling your mind that you've got a problem, then it can't find solutions, because solutions and problems aren't the same. So the idea is to ultimately always find 3 different solutions in every situation. Because remember, when we are finding solutions, we're zooming out. We're not so caught up in what's happening outside of us, where we feel like we have to react and respond, and we feel this pressure. And instead we're saying, okay, this is what's coming up. It's just information. I don't have to take it personally. So let me zoom out. And what are 3 solutions that could happen in this situation? Because in every situation, there's more than one way to navigate it. So if you know what, why, and how, and you also know that you're able to act on any of these solutions, you become more resourced, you become less emotionally attached, and you actually get to make a clear-headed decision that's actually backed with a solution, so that way you can change your reality. I want you to look back at your life and honestly look back and see, when have I told myself that I needed to make a decision? When have I put a time crunch on it? When have I felt like I was in a problem and I needed to fix the problem? I needed to get out of it. And so you made a really reactive decision, and that actually was like a snowball effect, where it made it worse because you felt like you had to make one decision. You felt like you had to make it quickly. You felt like you didn't have a lot of options, and you kind of felt stuck. If you're feeling stuck, then you're not believing that you're well-resourced, because somebody that's well-resourced is never stuck. You always have options, and you always have multiple options, and not only options, but you also have multiple solutions. This is why I always say, I don't let you guys play in victim frequency in my world. People that say they're stuck or they don't know what to do, No, I call you out on that, because you are not stuck and you do know what to do. The reason why people feel stuck is because they tell themselves that they're stuck, because they don't believe that they're fully resourced, because they don't believe that solutions are available for them, because they don't believe that things are working out for them, because they are taking things personally. And that just means that you probably just need some support. You probably need a mentor or a coach, somebody to help you navigate these situations, so that way you can zoom out, so that way you can see it differently. So that way you can realize that you always have options, and not just one. You always have multiple options. And a lot of the times when I'm working with clients one-on-one and they're in a situation that feels like they're just trapped and they're restricted, I will often help them to zoom out and see, okay, well, what if we did this? Or what if you did this? What about this? What about this? And it's like, once you start listing out the other options that are available to you, you can see it energetically and in the way they're carrying themselves, in their facial expressions, in their mental drama. You can see it all shift. You can see that they feel so free, because they're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think about it like that. And that's all it is. You didn't think about it that way. Which reminds me of that Wayne Dyer quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's all about how you're perceiving yourself, how you're perceiving the situation. And where a lot of people are hindering themselves is they aren't actually doing the personal development work. They aren't actually doing the mindset work to be able to perceive themselves and reality differently. And so because of this, they keep playing into a victim frequency, feeling like they aren't resourced, feeling like they're stuck, feeling like the world is against them. And ultimately, that's a choice. You're either unconsciously choosing it because you're not doing the work, or you're consciously choosing it and you're doing the work. And so you're cleaning it up every time you notice it. And if you can just start doing this, if you can just start zooming out, not being so reactive, changing the way you perceive things, having positive assumptions about the world, about yourself, seeing yourself as resourced, seeing that everything is working out for you, seeing that you always have options, your life is going to change. I want you to start trying on some of these presuppositions. I want you to take an honest inventory of where you've been at and where you're currently at, and asking yourself quite honestly whether you believe these presuppositions to be true or whether you believe the opposite. And no shame, no blame. Remember, we're not taking it personally. We're just looking at the information, and we're looking at the feedback that we've gotten. We're looking at the way things are going for us, looking at the way things have gone, and we're taking our power back and deciding, well, if I don't believe these things, and if these things are actually available for me to believe, then how can I start trying these on? How can I start shifting my perspective? How can I start shifting how I'm showing up, especially when things aren't going the way that we desire? Because a lot of people think in manifestation that everything's just going to be bright and shiny and everything's going to go your way, but that's actually not true. It's just that you have strengthened your ability to navigate anything that comes up for you. Because you've become resilient, because you become resourceful, because you know how to navigate what's happening inside of you and outside of you, you can actually always show up in the most positive and empowering state of being, because you're always gaining feedback, you're always gaining wisdom, you're always moving in the direction of what you desire. You're never allowing yourself to get stuck. You're never allowing yourself to beat yourself up. You're always just showing up differently if you're not getting the results that you want. And this is when you will become so resilient in your life. So let me know how this one went for you. Let me know your aha moments, because today is one of those days where there's a lot of breakthroughs. And this is, again, something that a practitioner would do with a client. And I'm helping you to start putting these presuppositions into your own mind. So let me know your takeaways. Let me know how this one landed for you, because I bet that there was a lot of things that you were like, oh, I see how I could be doing this differently. And I will see you tomorrow for day 24.